This is our talk, Kanban meets design thinking, aka
making the best thing. I'm Stanley, by the way. Hello, this is Chris. We changed the title as we went along, so you hopefully will see why we've got to that point. But let's start with these things as they always should start, with a graph.
a graph and a question. So, who would like to venture to tell me what is the gap? What's happening here between 0 and 6? Anyone got any ideas?
Lead time. Finishing your first story.
Could be. Could be, could be.
All good things.
Sorry?
Ooh.
Discovery could be. All good options, all good options. We'll see. We'll see. So let's give you a little bit of background about ourselves, give you a bit of our creds. My name's Chris Young. I'm the engineer in this story. I've been leading software development teams for about 15 years now, working for people like the BBC, ITV, Deutsche Telekom, UView, and most recently, spent the last year working for a company called We Are Friday, which is a full-service digital agency, where I've worked with Stanley.
Hello.
My job, my role, the kind of skin in the game I have is I'm responsible for ensuring that working software delivers on time.
So that's my bit, which is I'm the designer, again, in this play. My background, I guess I'm a bit of a generalist as a designer type. I started as an industrial product designer, that's what I trained in. Then I went and worked for Williams F1 as a graphic designer, drawing on F1 cars for a bit.
You drove the cars as well, didn't you?
No, not so much. Too big to fit in them. And then for about 4 years, I've been working making digital things, which was kind of where a lot of my interest always lied. That'll go with that. Started with native apps, and I've been at Friday for 3 years, so a bit longer than Chris, but working on big web builds. And to clarify what I do as a designer at Friday, apart from go red, look and feel of digital products, so interactions, how it works, all that sort of good stuff.
Exactly. This is the story of a journey. It's the story of mine and Stanley's journey from our starting points of a very much, me coming from, as I say, from a sort of software delivery, sort of engineering focus. Stanley with his design smarts, and the journey of us coming together over the course of a project, and in the course of that project, resolving the friction between my kind of delivery focus and Stanley's more kind of discovery focus, and how we made those things work together, not only to make working together more pleasurable, but also to affect the outcome, to make it so that in the words of the title, we did make the best thing.
And so obligatory cycling pitch is to show that we went on a journey together. This was...
this is a metaphor.
This is good, right? So we started in the Chilterns. Actually, this was the start of the project, so it is quite nice. Chris even stuck a yellow skin suit on for a point. The two positions that we came from... So I'm having great fun with this, so do excuse me if I take an eye out.
Not
Chris,
the face.
Not the face, not the face. Chris is, as Chris said, the engineering viewpoint that he comes from, and the design background that I have, and the way I see the world. Throughout the project, there was a source of a lot of tension, and my motivation for being here today is sort of towards the end. Well, no, throughout the project, I realised designers have to invest in the development process. You have to understand this stuff, and then you can learn where it reflects, where it sort of meshes in with your thinking, and then you can ultimately disagree with it, perhaps. So in some ways, me standing here at sort of a Kanban day is me investing in that development process. And hopefully, by doing that, we will, again, make the best thing.
Exactly. So I think it's fair to say that over the course of the project, we both learn from each other. So it's kind of anywhere where I work, I want learning to be a first-class citizen. I think if you're not learning while you're working, you're kind of, a lot of the sort of value and joy is gone. So the fact that we can, in a position where we can reflect on what we've done and then present it back to the community here that's golden to me. So the project itself, so what we were working on. So as I say, Friday we've got some great pillar clients. We've got HSBC, we've got EDF, and this is Nuffield Health. So Nuffield Health very kindly said, yeah, you can talk about our project at a conference, which is great of them. This was a two-stage project. The first stage had a drop-dead delivery date. It was by Christmas, in order to coincide with a big TV advertising campaign, we need our website to look like this, and we need our website redesigned, and we need a lot more kind of sort of love.
It was mainly just the front doors of the website. It's worth saying that. So the brand campaign that launched with the big ad on Coronation Street, not on it, but in the gaps.
First in break.
It was very good. we do the front doors so that the brand campaign sort of synced up so people don't get that disjointed experience. So
and then we built this very much pull-based gym pass mechanism. So historically, if you wanted to find out about Nuffield gyms, you had to sort of leave a message and someone would get back to you and say, oh, I gather you want to come to the gym, da, 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 da. We replaced it with you can sign up on the web, you can print a voucher, you can bring it in, and that's driven sort of membership into the gyms. So as I say, it's a fixed date project, and the goal was to deliver this. To begin with, to kick off the project, we did a story mapping exercise where we got the sort of rough shape and size of it. And that was basically able to tell us, are we biting off too much here? Are we biting off enough to be able to do in the time? And from that, we were able to apply the sort of Kanban method for forecasting throughput. So we were able to, so we did some probabilistic forecasting. We did some sizing of the individual features. Then we agreed as a team on a width limit, applied Little's law, and then mapped that onto a fairly sort of simple S-curve distribution and said, all right, should net out there. What actually happened was this. So that's the actual throughput. So that's the actual throughput that came sort of as we tracked through the project. And then as you can see, it's over here to the right. However, if you move this guy over here,
so many graphs. Carry on.
There's one more. There's one. You're a big fan of CFDs, aren't you, Mark?
Oh, of course I am.
There's one coming next.
One more graph.
So you actually see, if you transpose the two, weren't actually that far off. In fact, we actually outdid the forecast. It was less linear than the forecast, and scope increased, and we delivered a bit more. But that bit, actually, the probabilistic forecast, it actually did okay. So the question is, what was happening here? And to answer that, we can look at the CFD.
The new rave CFD. I did the colours.
Exactly. So my eyes. So what we see is the done starting here. So here's where we start sort of climbing out of the valley and up the S-curve. And what we see here is a whole lot going on. So we don't see any output, but we see a lot of stuff that's profoundly affecting the outcome of the project. And this is stuff that's really, really important. It's really important that we have this design work and this product work going on. If all you're interested in is the output, then you end up with this.
And quite frankly, this isn't very good, which is why I get more interested in the graphs. If you were to knock out 3 features a week, we all know this, but if you knock out 3 features a week for 10 weeks and you've got to do all the things that you contractually are obliged to do, you'll end up with a product that, yep, you've done all the output right, but you haven't actually got anything that works value-wise. You have to apply, this is sort of my viewpoint of the experience, you have to apply that experience lens over your features and how you prioritize them, and then you'll hopefully make something which is ultimately a bit more loved and used and useful.
So while we were putting the talk together, there's this fantastic slide doing the rounds on Twitter. I tracked it down to the Jez Humble et al. Lean Enterprise book. I love this because it talks to a real kind of problem that has historically affected sort of agile software delivery, where the focus that's completely on the features and nothing else means that in your efforts to build a minimum viable product, or any product in fact, you focus just on what's feasible. And in doing that, you don't get as far, or you devalue the things that make it valuable, usable, or delightful. Mm-hmm. These things they're not quite as kind of as easy to kind of get your hands around and specify, but they're absolutely essential. And if you're not thinking of them, if you're only thinking about kind of features and feature throughput, then you're going to end up with something that is the Soviet-style anti-pattern, the thing that is like, well, it's contractually right. Yeah, you can sign up at the website. Okay, it's all in Times New Roman and it doesn't scale properly on a mobile device and that, but hey, it does what it's supposed to.
Quite.
So, how do you address this? Well, you address this by taking a page out of design thinking. So I got interested in this originally through sort of reading some of Gojko Adzik's writing. That was my introduction to it. And then I read Tim Brown's Change by Design, which I thoroughly recommend. And what I read in doing that, in reading it, and this is kind of the reason I ended up doing the talk with Stanley, is I was reading this thinking, this is what Michael does, or this is what Stanley does. There's stuff here which I've seen and I've lived because I've seen it coming from the design group. I've seen it and I've seen this is stuff that is kind of challenging my kind of preoccupation with sort of feature throughput, and kind of like my kind of desire is with my skin, as I say, my skin in the game is to get the software working and delivered. What I was missing, and the kind of what I've learned from working with Michael, is this need for the project to start off with this divergent stage where you create choices. You create, if we're going to go all Chris Matts on it, you create options. And at that point, you see, as we go into the go back to the CFD, this is what you're seeing here. The expansion in the CFD here, with all this stuff happening in parallel, maps to the divergent stage of the project, and then we converge down and we drive up the S-curve and into delivery.
And it's this divergent stage that, again, is kind of the reason that I decided to go, yeah, all right, let's talk about that, because it's time for Stanley Megamix. So when you're designing experiences, sometimes maybe you start with one problem. You have a problem that someone's come to you, especially in the agency setup we have. The client's got this problem. This is kind of the brief. As you start to unpack that problem, so obviously it's not one problem. There's 47 problems, 10 of which you can touch, and there's another 12 that are coming in day 2. And then there's 52 problems over the hill because someone else has done something else. It gets bigger. It gets bigger. The work in progress gets bigger. And you're trying to find the edges of the problem or the problems. You're sort of trying to find out where can we do, how can we provide a solution or an idea or whatever it is that we're coming up with that's coherent and comprehensive across that. And that's kind of the model we saw earlier. You're making those choices, you're creating those choices for you to come back to. And this is, I can't believe I've put this up today, especially given I just got a t-shirt about this. So I'll caveat it with, at this stage it's bad to limit your whip in that way. I want everything up in the air. I want to see everything. And this is kind of the crux of our talk. The reason I'm doing it with Chris is that during the process of while we were doing this project, my design lead, Caroline, who's currently drunk in New York, I think, at the moment, on holiday, not working, she was having these tense conversations with Chris. So Chris is going, at stand-ups, can you limit your whip? Why are you doing, you've got all these things going on.
When are we going to see something that we can start building? You know, why are you looking at so many things at once?
Because we have no idea what it is that we're looking at yet. We're trying to find the edges of those things. And you want to see as much as you can so that you know what you're doing will work.
Yeah, and I'm going to freestyle here slightly. So one of the things I really love from Patrick's talk, so Patrick's joined us in the audience, which is fantastic. I'd never seen this before. This was a great thing on a column in a Kanban board, a minimum whip limit. So actually saying, rather than saying we don't want the whip to go above this point, we don't want it to go below this point. And that's encouraging the creation of options. And I thought that's fantastic. That's a great mechanic for actually saying, no, here we actually want, Dave Snowden talks about multiple concurrent experiments. You need this diversification, you need this kind of spread, so you can look across things and say, right, now I can understand the thing systemically, now I can think about the whole.
But conversely, so now I'm becoming Chris, which I didn't foresee. How long are you going to look at that? So somebody somewhere, I know a couple of people in the audience who are project managers, so at some point they're going to go, where the hell is the thing? What are you doing? I mean, I'm a designer and I'd love to sit in a room with a load of other people dreaming and thinking about stuff till the end of time. But at some point, you need to start converging. And so what you're probably looking for, I think, is enough problems to get started, to start that sort of feedback loop and get iterating, building, prototyping and going, that's probably about right, and being nimble with that. So let's try and relate it back to the work in a really obvious example. So these are a couple, it's also actually, quick timeout, the January project that you saw with the free Gen Pass and the front doors of the Nuffield Health website in line with their brand campaign, this led on to this project, which is a big relaunch of their new site, which hasn't happened quite yet, but we're working through. So that data we showed you earlier, that's from the January stuff, and this is how we've helped to forecast this project. Back in. So, this is Oxford Hospital. It's a lovely place if you're ever ill. City Gym in London.
A lovely place if you're not ill.
Correct. So this component here, this grey strip, which I realise you can't really see much of, it's a sub-navigation piece. So essentially within a hospital you'd have maybe the consultants that are there, I need to get to that page, the treatments, the various other bits and bobs, where you park your car. Similar thing exists on City Gym, but obviously it's through the classes, personal training, when the swimming pool closes, that kind of jazz. If I follow the core principle 2, I think, of limiting my whip and only going, I'm going to do hospitals first, I will have no clue whether the thing that I'm making works over here, and obviously you see vice versa. Hopefully the point is made that I need to see all the edges of the possible applications of the thing I'm thinking, and then I can work it out. And during this time, I smile more and more, and I get happier and happier, and he sweats more and more and more, and stand-ups become more like,
More fraud.
And those conversations that I said that Caroline had, that I had, they get tenser and tenser. But then this is, Chris drew a picture, which I've allowed to stay in, and didn't redraw.
He's humouring me, clearly.
But essentially, it's this journey of up the hill. It's harder, right? You're trying to work the thing out. He's getting tenser. The storm cloud or experience cloud, see what we did there, is brewing. And it's about to start, and this is my favourite slide, it's about to start raining features. See what we did. So it's Jerry Halliwell reference for me, and then I found out that the Weather Girls did it as well.
So yeah, so there's about 20 years age gap between here, so which Stanley wanted to emphasise for some reason. So,
I did.
But yeah. So it's almost as if there's this, this kind of more sort of amorphous or kind of less kind of tangible cloud has kind of gathered together, and then you're going to get this kind of torrent of stuff raining down. However, what we're not talking about is waterfall. We're not saying there is a discrete design phase, and the design phase creates these artifacts or creates this solution, and now you guys in engineering go build. What we're talking about, and this is the second thing to pull out of design thinking, is overlapping spaces. Tim Brown has these notions, these three spaces of inspiration, which is where sort of ideas are kind of, or sort of problems are identified, and you say, all right, yeah, and this is something that we could start to tackle. Ideation, where you start experimenting and coming up with sort of ways of fixing it or ways of solving it, and then implementation, where you put it together and then go for launch. And I thought that maps pretty nicely onto the CFD. And they are, as I say, they are overlapping spaces. So we have down here in the purple, we have engineering work that goes down. I just need to move this line down a little bit here. But you see, oh no, it's overlapping. So good. We have engineering work going on here. It's not producing anything yet. We're not actually turning it into output yet. But what it's doing is it's supporting the ideation process. So that might be us building prototypes. It might be us testing some third-party dependencies and say, you want to do it using this SMS provider? Well, let's just do a quick check to see if we can really do that. And then towards the end here, the ideation doesn't stop. These guys are still working on stuff as we implement, and we say, hang on a minute, we tried this out, and look, it doesn't work in IE8. And you say, not IE8, God help me. But then we do, so there's a kind of an ebb and flow of it, and it's, this is, what we're presenting here is not saying, and this is what every project should look like. We're saying, this is what this project looks like, and this is the...
It's also worth saying, I mean, you probably picked up that we will have rehearsed this, so this confession is somewhat fake. He's already told me off for it. But this here, it's probably worth saying that the data here is probably bigger. It's very, very hard to track and track that process, that our thoughts. How do you track ideas? I don't know of anything more demoralizing at the end of like a big creative session where someone goes, great, stick it all in Jira, and you have to make a ticket for your idea. It's like, it's horrendous. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you track that. I'm not standing here and saying I do. So it's a big credit to Chris and the project management team and the other engineers and stuff that this data even exists. But I now see the worth of it. So it's part of the journey that we've come on that goes, oh, okay, it's really interesting to see how we can map that and then map it onto these overlapping spaces.
Indeed. And so what I wanted to talk about was I'm a huge fan of the first David Anderson book, which I know there's a lot of great stuff that's come after that, and it's in a way I'm a bit sort of bit of a laggard. There's a fantastic quote in which I pulled out of the book while we were prepping the talk, which is, management must start to gather data on the cost of acquisition of ideas being put into the software development system. As I say, I'm a software development guy. I found forecasting the actual software development stage of the project really, once I had Little's Law and I had probabilistic forecasting, I found that pretty straightforward. And indeed, as we showed, we got quite a good match for the actual delivery. What was missing, the thing that we showed the gap at the beginning, was the cost of the acquisition of ideas. But now we have some data on the cost of the acquisition of ideas. And we could do a very simple finger in the air thing and say, well, it's about the same as the cost of delivery. And so that's the overall cost of your project. Again, this is one sort of sample of data for one project. But if you start to gather that data and start to say, okay, well, it's going to, these kind of width limits deliver stuff at this sort of rate and so on and so forth, then you're on the right track.
And the the spaces that we were talking about, those spaces of collaboration, there is nothing which we could show you that more illustrates it than this. So this is the living style guide. Now this is something which we've done at Friday on a couple of projects previously to this, and this was like no other, we just carried on. We build big system builds. So it's kind of, it's not just a one-page website. Components are reused throughout the digital ecosystem. And the whole build is responsive. So I don't want to really make a picture of the website that then is only on one instance. It needs to live somewhere on a URL where it's living code and it's the actual thing. So what this is the componentized design system. First broken down on the left with my sexy pointer, you can see the different components that exist throughout the site, and I can click into them and I can see the source code and I can see the HTML, the stats. And then on the right hand side, you start to build up the templates of these components put together actually into page layouts. Now, you can't see it because it's tiny, but up there it says localhost 3000 or whatever port it's running
port 3000.
It's running on my machine. I have it, which leads me to one of the big points I want to make, which is designers have to get Git. And this isn't, I'm not going to stand here and go, designers should all learn to code. That's like another conference a bit further down the road. This is just the fact that you should be able to access the code base of the thing you're working on. It's kind of like a print designer going, I've spent 3 days on this and my mum's off to print it. Like, it doesn't make sense.
It's creating the overlap. It's kind
exactly.
of, yeah.
And the idea that the minute I have Git, then I can change something or I can start to understand how things are built as well, and I can change them and affect them in a way where I actually know the medium.
I mean, we did it. The first time we did it was because we had this running in CI, and one of the developers has said, "Yeah, I've got this new bit of your design, but it's only running on my machine, so I could come and you could come and see it." It's like, well, why can't we run it on Stanley's machine? It's like kind of, and then
it was to do with the main site navigation. It's quite complex. So we prototyped it at a few different points, and it got to the point where it had moved out of quick prototyping tools, and then we'd moved into kind of code, obviously real planes of interaction, and it had kind of gone out of my realms of ability. So I can kind of make things go like that, but then if you want them to work across and build them properly into production-ready code, it had gone to David, who's the front-end developer who was building it. So exactly that, I need to pull it down, which means I have to go into terminal. This is really hard for me. This isn't where I am happiest. And by happiest...
This is where I am happiest.
I hate it. The best bit for me was I got to do the shell, which I gave it a funky name. I put a bit of a translucency through it.
It
was good. It kept me happy, right?
Is that Yosemite Mountain?
It is indeed. It was my background at the time. I've since upgraded it. The point being, it's a necessary evil. It's part of me investing in the development process, and it's difficult. So you sort of have to accept that it will be tricky, but it's so worth it, because the day when my design work isn't just a picture of a website, it's actual changes. I mean, we can do that to a point, but when it's actual me changing the JavaScript and stuff, I'll be making proper digital products.
Well, those feedback loops are just so much tighter than that.
Exactly, yeah. You're doing the real thing, right?
Completely. So that's one of the ways that we enable collaboration. It's one of the ways that we get these overlapping spaces. So we're going to step back from that a bit and talk about the sort of team as a whole and the kind of collaborative space that the team occupies. And this is a stand-up from the beginning of this project. And this is what I somewhat sort of facetiously call a seance stand-up, which is the kind of Scrum style of stand-up where everyone stands in a circle and you go through and you answer the 3 questions and you somehow sort of conjure up the spirit of the work. And what I find very hard is I find it very hard to take those individual kind of descriptions of activities or problems or constraints and synthesize it into a vision of the work. I find that kind of I sort of lose it a bit.
You do just take pictures of them though. That's the thing. That's why it's difficult for you. Just stands in the corner with a camera.
But if I didn't take the pictures, we wouldn't have the assets for the
material recording.
Yeah. So I thought it was a kind of an achievement, or kind of, it certainly helped me with, again, my skin in the game is delivery. It helped me that we moved to a walk the board style stand-up where it's like, here's everything, it's in Jira, we're getting those lovely metrics, and we can start from the right with where the most value, where the stuff closest to being realised is. We can start with the things that are blocks and so on, and we can walk through the work, organise around the work, and then use that as the kind of the way of stimulating conversations around the work. So it came as something of a surprise to me when I sat in the Slaughtered Lamb pub with Stanley after the successful delivery of the January project, and for Stanley to tell me that
those stand-ups aren't very good, Chris. They are so dry at points. Quick caveat. I fit into a lot of the design cliches of I cycle to work, I drink the AeroPress coffee in the morning.
you live in East London.
I do live in East London as well. I set my day up by, you wake up, you read a couple of things, you start to think about your day ahead. Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I need to talk to that person about that. Oh, I wonder if that's, I've read a bit of that, and that was quite interesting. I look forward to the human interaction when I get to work. I look forward to going, I'm going to grab you about this, and that's what I see stand-ups as in some ways. I know they're so, other people will have different views on, I need to see all the work. Obviously, we're seeing that from Chris, but for me, it's about human interaction and like a temperature check on how people are as well. Coming into work to say hello, to get my cup of coffee, to go to the stand-up, and then be greeted with 46 LCD backlit inches of a Jira board, with people stood around staring at it going, what's Nuff 335? Anyone know? Oh no, I think he's late. I don't know, he's doing that. Didn't work for me. And it missed a really, really key bit, which was the remaining human. Sort of as we're in these stand-ups. It's something that Stacey, who sat and works with us in the front row, used to say in a previous project, was the temperature check. You instantly know in a stand-up when I'm talking to someone, oh, they had a horrible day today or yesterday. They've got no time to talk to me today, so I can't go you and you. I need today. I'll go okay, you tomorrow, and then you can frame it and you can cheer people up while you're doing it. So we had a chat about a couple of beers, and we had a chat about maybe how we could change it.
Yeah, and so Stanley did what you'd want an engineer to do. An engineer to, rather than coming along and saying, I've got a solution for you, and we're going to do this. He really probed me and said, those stand-ups, they were terrible. What were you trying to get out of them? And I said, well, the thing I really need is I need to see the state of the work, and I need to see where the constraints are, I need to see where the bottlenecks are so that we can act on that bit, so we know where to focus our resource. And Stanley gave me the kind of the version of the spiel he's just given you now, which is about the human interactions. It's about human interactions around that and understanding that. So we thought, well, we can bring this together. What we can do is we went back to the team and we said, all right, I gather the Jira board isn't really working. What could we do? We agreed as a team that we would redesign the board and we would design it on a kind of human scale and on paper. And what we netted out at, was there one before that? No?
It's up here, but we can't see it. But Chris had some requirements, obviously. Had some requirements around what the board would do. Obviously, I had my requirement at the bottom, which was it would be fun.
But that's on that post-it.
Huh?
It's on the post-it, fun.
Oh, of
you just
course.
Can't see it.
Fun is on the post-it note, yeah, in small letters. And so as you see, we have kind of the different departments.
So yeah, so it's a kind of, rather than it being a sort of value stream map, it's more of a value network, and we have the different parts of the value of the different sort of teams or capabilities that are required to deliver the project have got their own space. And because it's a healthcare project, and because I don't know who came up with the idea, it was a great one, was that each different part would have a different part of the body to represent them. So we have the heart of design here.
Heart and soul of everything.
Exactly. We have engine, ear, ing, which is
That's
a
good pun
good
as well.
pun. The head here. This head here is the client, is Nuffield. So anything that's gone over to them, and we're waiting for it to come back. And the kind of two things that I kind of stipulated. One is that I need to be able to see the difference between whether work is being done or is being queued. So if work is sitting around the outside, that's the queue. So that would be the queue round here. If it's inside, it's in progress. So you can see a distinction between the two. And the other was to have some distinction between different kind of classes of work. So the yellow stuff is all value, The blue stuff is sort of operational overhead. But it's at a glance you can see, oh God, there's a lot of stuff queuing up for engineering to do. Have we properly resourced that? Is there any point pulling anything more in to any of the upstream stations if all it's going to do is kind of sort of buffer up against engineering?
And this is reflected in Jira as well, so all of them have little tickets on. So we can still do the who's got Nuffield 335, and we can find that out. So everyone's happy. So we've also just explained a load of in-jokes, of which we've got a couple of groans about. I mean, engineering, that's a classic. I don't know why you groan. But
I gather the BCS are going to be taking that as their official motto.
Correct. And we've also brought this along, which is a sound machine, and makes a variety of noises, of which we use a lot, which means no work will be getting done back at Friday. They don't have the sound machine. As things move around the board, we use it. Again, I'm explaining an in-joke. It's a bit like, well, why? Because they lose context here. There's a lot of blank faces. Understand the power of in-jokes and a bit of levity when you're in those stand-ups, because you're going to have shit days. Teams will go through bad days, and when a small joke or just someone drops a little bit of humour, you'll get through those. And that optimism will ensure that as a team, you have more good days than bad. Even if it's a problem with a horrible client or a problem that you can't fix or a third party so-and-so is a bit of a... It's that optimism that will drive you on.
Exactly, and it's the optimism is a very human trait, and I think this is where I have to talk about the thing I've learned most from Stanley, and I'm going to relate it back to Tim Brown, Change by Design, is, I take my hat off to Stanley for his emotional intelligence, his ability to be able to read people in a situation and kind of put that lens on things. And the optimism is key. And the great quote from Tim Brown, without optimism, the unshakable belief that things could be better than they are, then the will to experiment will be continually frustrated until it withers. And without that will to experiment, without that desire to actually think further than just the sort of just throughput and output, you wouldn't get this divergence, you wouldn't get this creation of features, which then allows us to converge and to deliver and build the best thing.
And so for my conclusions, trust the process. It's going to diverge, it's going to go crazy, hopefully, because then you'll be doing properly good things. If it all starts to get a bit much, the whip will, whip will go up. There will be more work in progress. But know that at some point it will converge and it will start to narrow down, and you'll move up the S-curve and drive through it. Just trust that process and trust each other through it. The next one, my big one, you've got to invest in the development process. You've got to understand it. Even if you don't want to learn how to code, that's absolutely fine. But you have to understand the way the features are going to be delivered. If I design software, I just make pictures of it unless I can actually affect the code base. You have to invest in that. It's just a thing. I don't understand how people can't.
It's creating this overlap again, isn't it?
Exactly, those collaborative spaces. And then my final one is the human thing. Be an optimist, be a human throughout the whole process. I speak design. I would prefer to talk about typography than Git. But at the same time, I'm trying to learn a bit of engineer to Chris, because he obviously speaks engineer. And we trust each other both with the experience and with the features that will drop out of that. And I think if you do that, then you will make the best thing. And it's also worth saying that we didn't just make the best thing, although we stood here and got the credit. There's a whole host of very excellent people, a couple of who are in the room, Firefox is down the back, and Alkesh, and two lovely ladies at the front. They did all this, as opposed to us.
Exactly.
That's it.
All right, thank you very much. So do we have time for questions?
Yes,
Does anyone have a question? No one at all. The gentleman there.
Chris, going back to the diagram, the MVP diagram. How do you manage what you decided to include? Do you make any decisions about
The story map.
This one here. So I think this is.
That could be, if you make your pyramid wide enough.
Well, so I think it's so. So I'm going to go to kind of to David's point from the keynote. Really, how do you measure business value? It's a multifaceted thing, and you've got to understand what are the different weightings to the value of those different things. So we could have said, well, actually, the most important thing is that you can ask for a gym pass and it'll be successfully delivered to your email. But if then the process of, we had a lot of back and forth over how many fields should be filled in before you can click and it'll say send me a gym pass. So finding the optimum point where that becomes sort of as frictionless as possible for the consumer, but also doesn't become a kind of, but fits all the kind of legislative or sort of governance issues around sort of data collection, was a difficult one, and that was one where we had to do a certain amount of experimentation to ensure that usability was being factored in. So I think it's going to entirely depend on the context. It's going to depend on the kind of how important is, for something that's public facing, maybe the richness of experience is going to be more important than something that's, say as a kind of point of sale thing or whatever.
It's a delightful thing, but that's a really hard thing to say to designers. That's
You have a good conversation about it.
right.
Anyone else? Gentleman at the back.
Whether you split, what some companies split in terms of information architect and design, or you don't. For you, design is everything, the structure design.
No, so there's a UX team, there's a design team, there's some business analysts as well, and in that, sorry Stanley, I'm not letting you get a word in edgeways.
Go and say.
In the space here, we've actually got this is essentially the sort of the product group working here. This I have just to make this sort of a little sort of easier to read from a distance. I've actually collapsed the UX and design into one colour, but in the full fat version of this, it's actually two separate groups with their own queues and everything.
And the way they're sort of split down, or kind of the way that we're doing it and currently experimenting with and constantly changing at Friday, is kind of you have an experienced design group, right? Within that, you would have generalists, and then you maybe would have a specialist. Like if it's a really, really complex IA issue, then the specialist. You kind of that collaborative team, again, that can do different things. But within this and the data that comes out, it's kind of like, it's a design task. And it would also depend how you split down the project. So I worked with a front-ender quite extensively on the navigation, this thing that I've been talking about, because it's a really knotty problem. And with the BA, to understand how all the business entities are split down. But while that's happening, there's a UX or an IA doing the taxonomy structure of all the treatments for Nuffield Health. So although it's not broken out, it's kind of all rolled in. If that answers your question.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Cheers, thank you.